Okay, Rambam, Sefer Misvot, Misvot Aseh, positive commandment. We're up to Kuf Yud Aleph, number 111. The last thing we spoke about, still in the wake of talking about korbanot and purity and impurity. We spoke yesterday about the purity process and procedure and details of the Mesorah, the person who contracts Sarat. Now, we're going to see another component of that. It's going to be a long discussion, this first Mizvah number 111 regarding the Mesorah. So Mizvah Kuf Yud Aleph, Hisha Siva HaMesorah Legalayah V'hi HaTahorah HaShiniyala. So it says that there is an obligation. Yesterday we spoke about the purity process of the Mesorah. We have the various types of wood and the two birds. We slaughter them. We have also the Mayim Hayim. We sprinkle on them. So the second stage in the process, he says, is that the Mizvah for the Mesorah Legalayah, which is to shave everything, his head, all the hair on his body. As we mentioned, the source for the laws of Mesorah is the Masechet Negaim Meseder Tahorot. V'hu Amaro, and the source for this particular Mizvah is Bayom HaShibi'i Yigalayah, on the seventh day. This is talking about, when the Kohen visits the Mesorah, sometimes he determines right away that he has a nega, blemish, that's sarat, and he's impure. Sometimes there's a holding period where he closes him up for 7 days, sometimes the second set of 7 days. But once he is proven to be and acknowledged by the Hacham as someone who has sarat, mesorah, so he's closed up. We have to wait for it to go away. He has to be revisited by the Kohen. Then he pronounces him to be tahor, or at least recovered, we can say. So then he has 7 days from there. On the seventh day, the Torah says he shaves. We've already spoken a statement from Hachamim in general, which is about shaving. 3 different types of people and situations have a mizvah to shave. Mesorah, Nazir, Halvim. We said Levim was a one-time affair in the desert, and otherwise the Nazir, who we spoke about already, and now the Mesorah. We won't go into details. It's a Masechet Negaim. Ukan iba elecha mahasiba b'manotenu tiglachat Mesorah mizvah b'fnei asma. So now, as promised, the Rambam is going to explain why is it that I am counting the shaving of this Mesorah as an independent mizvah. When we spoke about Nazir, we had something called Tiglachat HaNazir, which incorporated both the shaving and the korbanot, and counted by the Rambam as a single mizvah. Now the Rambam, and he said, when I get to Mesorah, I'm going to tell you why I will split it. And now, true to his word, the Rambam is counting the mizvah, or the act, or the obligation of shaving, as a separate obligation to the Mesorah bringing korbanot, unlike with the Nazir, and he's going to explain to us why that is. Why is it an independent mizvah for the Mesorah to shave? And bringing korbanot is separate and independent from this. Because in truth, there's no connection between the obligation for him to shave and for him to bring his korbanot upon recovery and purity. And there are 2 separate objectives, shaving and bringing korbanot. And that is because the purity, end of the purity procedure of the Mesorah is dependent upon his shaving. Ubashishim min Nazir Amru, the 6th perek in Masechet Nazir, To show you no coincidence, in our Mishnah program, this is what we learned last night, the 6th perek in Masechet Nazir. Amru ma ben Nazir leMesorah, ela shezeh taharoto tluya biyamim, v'zeh taharoto tluya b'tiglachato. They asked rhetorically there the difference. What's the difference between Nazir and Mesorah regarding one of the laws that had to do with bringing korbanot on the wrong day, and you have to rebring them? That they stated there that the Nazir, his tahorah, his purity, is dependent upon days, while the Mesorah's purity, the Mesorah's purity, when it says this, referring to the Mesorah, his purity is dependent upon his shaving. The shaving is an integral part of his procedure. You can say the end stage of his procedure of purity. V'nishlema tiglachato hashiniya tahor l'tameh kesheres. And when the Mesorah shaves, and this is the second time he's shaving in the procedure, that's why he's calling it the second shaving, and that's finished. So now he's tahor in terms of technical purity. He no longer has the ability, when contact with something else, let's say, to cause something else to become tameh, like would be with tumat sheres of a rodent, where contact makes you become tameh. For a while there, the Mesorah had that level of impurity. Contacting him would make you tameh. And now once he shaves, no longer can you contract tumah from him. Now what's left? He's tahor. In technical terms, what's left is that he's what's called mehusar kippurim, means he's lacking atonement, which is a terminology regarding korbanot, meaning you still have your korban to bring, and your korban will provide atonement. Just like anyone else who's in a similar status, who owes, so to speak, a korban. Shehu tahor milatameh kesheres, hebi korbanatav olo hevi. And therefore, the objective of his shaving was to put him in a technical tahor status, regardless of bringing his korbanot. V'tachlit havaat korbanotav tashlum kaparato kishar mehusare kapara kilomar zav is above yuledet. And then the bringing of his korbanot is the completion not of his purity, but of his atonement, as obligated as the Torah obligates him to, just like similar other situations where people have to bring korbanot to culminate their atonement, like the Zab, the Zabah, and the one who gives birth. Ukhfar kadam lanu amaram, as the Gemara says, arba'a mehusharei kapara, referring to these four. There are four that are lacking atonement until they bring the korbanot. And there in the Gemara they explained actually, as opposed to the Nazir, who's not looked at as lacking atonement. Rather, bringing korbanot for the Nazir is not atonement. It is part of the culmination of his tahorah process, meaning he waits days, he shaves, he brings his korban, and then his vow, it's not really tahorah, to some extent you can call it that, but his vow was over. And now there's permissibility for him to drink wine. And no component can substitute for the other. In other words, you need days, you need shaving, and you need korbanot for the Nazir in order to release him from his vow. So therefore, for the Nazir, the shaving and the korbanot have this inseparable relationship, and only with their combination can he be released. It's had the same objective, can he be released from his vow. And then those things, not just drinking wine, but tum'at met, will now be permissible to him. assuming he's not a Kohen. Ubeshishim min Nazir Amru. Also in the 6th perek, now in the Gemara, Masechet Nazir, it says, Galah al hazebach v'nimsa pasul teglachato pesula v'zebahav lo alula. Actually, this is a Mishnah. If the Nazir shaves after a korban and the korban was found to be pasul, it's for whatever reason, let's say it became tameh or something in the procedure, it's no longer usable as a korban. So now because of that, the Gemara says, because the disqualification of his korban, his shaving is also, so to speak, disqualified. Korban doesn't count. That shows you that they have this integral connection and they're inseparable. That they are connected and conditional on each other regarding the Nazir, the shaving and the Korban. גם כן התבהר שנזיר שכלול ימיו אסור לגלח ולשתות יין ולתנאים למתים עד שיעשה מעשה ההוא kulo, also, the Tosefta explains that the things that he was prohibited during his time period of his Neder Nazir, like wine and Tumat Met, will continue until his full procedure, which includes his Korban. He comes to the Beit HaMikdash, he shaves, he puts his hair that he shaved under the pot that's cooking the Korban, and bring his 3 korbanot. They use that one code word for both shaving of the Nazir and bringing korbanot, and that is tiglahat hanazir, which really shows you that they're connected. They use the same catchphrase for both the korbanot, and the shaving of the Nazir. And in the Gemara, they said, they're explaining the Mishnah. If someone makes a pledge and he says, upon me, legaleach, that's the word he uses, that means that he's pledging to bring korbanot. He says legaleach, he's pledging to bring korbanot of a Nazir and for it to be offered on his behalf. So from all this, what do we get? That regarding Nazir, that the shaving is connected to the bringing of korbanot. And only with their combination is his obligation. Nazirut ended the Yishteh Yain and Nazir Yain. Umnam tiglachat tum'ah, as opposed to what? As opposed to the Mesorah, where the shaving and the bringing of korbanot are 2 separate objectives. One, the former is purity, and the latter is atonement. Umnam tiglachat tum'ahi medin hamizvah kemo shebi'adu b'ma shekadam. But regarding Mesorah, the shaving is of tum'ah, so to speak, is from the laws. I'm sorry, now he's referring to Tiglahat Tum'ah of the Nazir when he becomes Tameh and he breaks up his days of the vow of Nazir, that there's another shaving and bringing of Korbanot, which is a separate deen, which we explained already. And he just leaves us off with what he proceeded, talking about this mitzvah, which is the shaving of the Mesorah, which is independent of Korbanot. So now he gave us this big, long distinction between Nazir, where he counted shaving and Korbanot as one mitzvah, and Mesorah, where he counted them as separate Misvot. One more mitzvah about the Mesorah, Mitzvah Kof Yod Bet number 112. He shesivanu liyot Mesorah yadua lakol ad sheyubdelu mimenu bnei adam. That the Mesorah has to be identifiable to the extent that people will separate themselves from him. How does he do that? They prove the source for this in the Torah. There it says in the pasuk that the Mesorah that has the blemish, his clothing should be ripped and his hair should be grown. meaning not cut. And that is the way he identifies himself to other people to be a Mesorah. How do I know this is a separate positive commandment? In the Midrash, it says as follows: because it says, this is regarding a Kohen Gadol now, changed lanes. This is in Parashat Emor, where it says the Kohen Gadol can't mourn, he can't rip his clothing, he can't grow his hair out. I may say that applies to the Kohen Gadol, even if he has a blemish of sarat, maybe, that he can't rip his clothing nor grow his hair out. And what about the pasuk regarding the Mesorah, that it says he has to rip his clothing, cannot grow his hair out? And I might say that's regarding everybody else, every other Jew. Besides that one Jew who's a Kohen Gadol, you may think all of this. Talmud Lomar, says the Midrash, the pasuk says, Asher bo hanaga. What does that mean, Asher bo hanaga? Afilu Kohen Gadol, begadav kiruim, v'rosho yeparua v'yegadel se'ar. That word Asher bo hanaga tells me even the Kohen Gadol, who in a period of mourning is not allowed to rip his clothing and grow his hair out, but regarding his Mesorah, his period status of Mesorah, he must as well, like everybody else, abide by the clothing ripping and the non-hair cutting. And here, what do you see from this? A Kohen Gadol has Misvot lo ta'aseh normally of clothes ripping and non-hair cutting, growing hair out. So that's crazy. He has a Misvot lo ta'aseh, and yet if he has a blemish of sarah, we're telling him to do it. What's up with that? Seems like we're making him violate something. So we have a principle. We just mentioned this recently. If you have a contradiction between Misvat aseh and Misvat lo ta'aseh, if you can fulfill both of them, that's wonderful. Aseh lo ta'aseh. If you can't, we have this principle that aseh is dohe, overrides and supersedes a lo ta'aseh. And since we see the Midrash teaching us from the pasuk, so what do you learn from all this? So first of all, that explains to you how it's possible for us to allow the Kohen Gadol to violate him Misvat lo ta'aseh and rip his clothing and grow his hair out if he has sarah. But what's the net result of this whole analysis? That it's a Misvat aseh to rip your clothing for anybody, including the Kohen Gadol, to rip your clothing, to grow your hair out when you have sarah. The fact that the Midrash gives you the formula of aseh, dohe lo ta'aseh, with the Kohen Gadol, it shows you that this is called an aseh. And that's really why the Rambam brought this whole side point discussion about the Kohen Gadol. And now we know, as a little bit of a digression from this, you can say that the Mesorah is almost what's called like the Binyan Av, is the headline father mitzvah regarding other types of people. This was asked by one of the members of our class yesterday, who become tameh, that they should create a recognition so other people can be conscious of them, and if they want a distance from a person who's tameh, not become tameh, to do something to indicate that. V'lashon Sefer, the Midrash, in fact, says explicitly, tameh met u'bo'el nida v'chol ha'metameim et ha'adam minayin. How do you know also that other types of people, for instance, a person who was tameh met, or someone who was with a woman who was nida, etc., people that are tameh for other reasons also have to self-identify. Talmud Omar, the tameh yikra. Regarding the Mesorah, it says, and they'll pronounce him tameh, tameh. Vehaperush, and that comes to mean also that not just him, the Mesorah, but every tameh person should, so to speak, announce upon himself, identify hatumah, make some type of recognition. And anyone who touches me is tameh, and therefore, if you want to keep away, keep away. So again, as we mentioned before, it's not asur to become tameh. And yes, if someone becomes tameh, he is making other people exposed to his tumah. That's true. But the Torah wants that person to self-identify, to give other people the choice. If I don't want to become tameh, keep away from this person. So that's an extended misvah that you learn, or within the realm of this misvah, the Mesorah, self-identifying. We also know that this identification of the Mesorah with his hair and the clothing is not an obligation for a woman who contracted Mesorah. V'omram ha'ish poreah uporem ve'en ha'isha poreat uporemet. And the Hakamim say explicitly the man has to grow his hair and rip his clothing, the woman does not. Aval he ta'ateh al safam, but she still has to observe the pasuk in the Torah that says that she has to wrap herself with, and she's cover her mouth with her garment. And still let everyone else know and identify that she has the tum'ah of sarat, just that she doesn't have to grow her hair out and rip her clothing. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.